Good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 28th, and this is Queer News Tonight, the world's first live LGBTQ daily evening news. It is time to queer up the news.
Watch as we bring you these and other stories from the LGBTQ headlines. J.K. Rowling cites debunked psychoanalyst to claim a scandal is brewing involving transgender kids. And rideshare profiles with LGBTQ symbols are canceled more often by drivers.
The world's largest tech company, Google, closes offices until July 2021. And John Lewis is laid to rest in the Capitol Rotunda.
And tomorrow night, Wednesday at 8 p.m. on It's Happening Out, we will discuss the fact that glory holes are now officially the go-to for safer sex, according to health experts. Then on Thursday at 8 p.m., our diverse panel from the LGBTQ community discusses why 6 out of 10 LGBTQ members hide their COVID-19 symptoms from their partners. Good evening, America. It is 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 28, 2020, and it is time to queer up the news. We are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories we are going to tell tonight on Queer News Tonight. Tonight on the world's first live daily queer evening news show.
Tonight's news about the gay community and the news from an LGBTQ perspective. Are our gay stories important to you? In headlines, politics, entertainment, gay culture, travel, religion, and more. Reported by respected anchors.
Out of the closet and into the headlines on Q News Tonight. Thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. We are live and unedited. This is an unedited show, so anything can happen. This evening, we will bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and this is my co-guest anchor, David Hopkins, and my co-guest anchor, Misty Eyes. Let's queer up the news. Tonight, we bring you queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in America is diverse. The LGBTQ community around the world is vast, and we are going to bring you the bullet points of queer news for today, Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. We begin by reporting queering up business. Rideshare profiles with LGBTQ symbols canceled more often by drivers. Watch this.
So you're kicking me out because I'm gay? Are you kicking me out because I'm gay?
Yes. Get out.
You're kicking me out because I'm gay.
Get out.
You're kicking me out of your car.
Get out.
Because I'm gay?
Get out.
You're kicking me out because I'm gay?
Get out.
Don't touch me.
Get out.
You fucking asshole.
Get out.
What is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Get out of my
This
car.
is an Uber ride. I paid you for a service.
This is my
You are
personal
kicking
car.
me out because I am gay?
Get out.
You can go ahead and call the fucking cops. You gotta be fucking kidding me.
I am gonna
It is
call them.
2019. You're kicking me out of the car because I'm gay.
I can reject any ride I want to. I'm calling the police.
Please call the police.
Racial and anti-LGBTQ bias persists in ride-sharing services even though companies have taken steps to reduce it, according to a new study from Indiana University's Bloomington's Kelley School of Business. They did this by manipulating user data that the driver would see by using traditionally black or white perceived names, and to show support for the LGBTQ community, they simply overlaid a rainbow filter on top of a photo, a hallmark of support online. The study found that those filters made it more than twice as likely to have a ride canceled compared to that of a Caucasian profile with no LGBTQ markers. It has been suggested that this data be integrated into these services and drivers face punishment for showing such bias.
I've ridden on Ubers and I've driven as an Uber driver. I did not ever cancel rides, and there's times I definitely wish I had, and it had nothing to do with race or gender, however.
I used to drive Uber a lot, and I remember one night I picked somebody at like 3 o'clock in the morning from a bar, and he almost sexually assaulted me on the way home. And since then, I stopped picking up anybody with a male name after like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then they stopped showing names at all, and I stopped driving.
I think in trying to take the high road of the importance of this study is ignorance, and we need to continue to face why the ignorance takes place, and we face ignorance with education.
Next week, we're up business. World's largest tech company, Google, closes offices until July 2021. Watch this.
Google is letting its employees work from home for at least another year, a move that shows the tech industry is bracing for a long-term pandemic. Google CEO Sundar Pichai wrote in an email to Google employees on Monday saying that the company is, quote, extending its global voluntary work from home option through the end of June of 2021 for roles that don't need to be in the office. Now that means nearly 200,000 full-time and contract workers will stay on the smart working system. Google previously planned to reopen some offices for a limited number of employees starting July 6th, but later made that optional due to the worsening COVID-19 situation in the U.S.
Google and its parent company, Alphabet, will keep employees working from home until at least June of 2021 because of concerns over the coronavirus pandemic, the company said in a statement on July 27th. The technology giant had previously planned to bring workers back to its offices beginning in January. Its new policy makes Alphabet the first major U.S. corporation to definitively extend its work-from-home timeline so far into the future. The new policy affects almost all of the roughly 200,000 full-time and contract workers who work for Google and Alphabet.
This story is amazing and shocking that it is a year from now that these people will finally be going back to their offices.
In addition to that, the fact that we could be facing this pandemic a year from now, which is what Google says, this is a gigantic story because it is beyond COVID, post-COVID, a reflection that work at home is the change that is going on in America and around the world. It is coming for most of us.
A lot of corporations are finding that having their employees working from home ends up much more cost-effective for everyone. Employees don't have to commute, and the services don't have to pay for buildings, electricity. I think we're seeing a change in the way corporate structure works and hopefully a return to actually being able to be with your family.
Next week, we're at the USA. Louisville and 2 armed militias. Everybody is armed. Watch this.
LMPD says that they have not made any arrests in connection with that accidental shooting, leaving 3 people injured, like Jesse just told us. That happened earlier today at the NFAC staging area in Baxter Park. Investigators say the individual involved was a participant in the march, and they are still investigating what happened. Police also say just moments ago that they made 5 arrests during today's demonstrations, but they did not receive any reports of violence or damage and said that today's event remained peaceful.
LGBTQ America is once again seeing the repercussions of the violent gun culture in America. Following the police killing of Breonna Taylor, who was sleeping in her own home, calls have been getting louder and louder for the arrest of the killers. Now, peaceful protesters are squaring off against the Not Fucking Around coalition, armed militants who are demanding justice and equality. There is only one thing for certain, and that is tensions are rising in Louisville. And if history is in any indicator, we need to watch what happens next, as it could have a major impact for all of us.
I have never in my entire life in America seen what I saw in Louisville over the weekend. On one side of the street were white nationalists protesting, completely covered and carrying guns. And on the other side of the street, Black Lives Matter and other protesters demonstrating against what had gone on in Louisville, completely armed with guns. I don't know where America is going, but it's not a good place.
And yet the Not Fucking Around coalition generally practices safe gun usage. There was the incident we showed in the video, but it's not like those crazies in St. Louis who were just aiming the gun at everybody who walked by their house.
The word militia scares me in and of itself. Guns scare me. This whole story scares me.
We do an emotional queuing up of the USA tonight in reporting that John Lewis has been laid to rest in the Capitol Rotunda. Watch this.
Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the United States House of Representatives.
To the family of John Lewis, welcome to the Rotunda. Under the dome of the U.S. Capitol, we have bid farewell to some of the greatest Americans in our history. It is fitting that John Lewis joins this pantheon of patriots, resting upon the same catafalque of President Abraham Lincoln.
Sing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
John Lewis honored us all one final time Monday, his powerful voice echoing in the halls of the Capitol as it brought all that heard it to a standstill. As the recording of Lewis ended, Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, took her seat and the rotunda erupted into applause. Then Pelosi rose to her feet again and everyone followed her lead. In a perfect circle, the guests stood and clapped, the casket draped into the stars and stripes in the center of the room. Lewis, who grew up on a farm in rural Alabama in the Jim Crow South, became the first black member of Congress to lie in state in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, resting in a place previously used for Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall.
I can't think of a better place to have held this. The ceiling of the Capitol Rotunda is adorned with a painting called The Apotheosis of Washington, where the founding fathers are being gifted the tools of progress by ancient gods, and no one in my living memory has advanced progress as much as John Lewis.
This entire story is absolutely beautiful. May he rest in power among giants.
I watched him walk across the Selma Bridge 5 years ago in the 50th anniversary of that march, and I learned so much about the Selma Bloody Sunday. And in this last week, I have learned so much more. He stood up for us at Pulse. He will always be an icon for the LGBT community because he did that, and we say goodbye.
Next week, Queer Up the USA. Trump supporter starts a Kill Transgenders chant at rally. Watch this.
At one point, those at the Back the Blue rally stepped into the street. There was one particularly tense moment caught on camera by a viewer when one person from the Back the Blue rally began shouting.
Kill transgenders! Kill transgenders!
After that, speakers addressed the Black Lives Matter group about their experiences in the community as those from the other side continued chanting. Shaler police were on hand to block the streets. Both groups left without further incident after 5 o'clock.
A rally in favor of the police, coined as Back the Blue, turned ugly in quick fashion when one of its members shouted to kill transgenders, which drew gasps from the Black Lives Matter protesters across the street for its obvious vileness. Should be noted that while some of his cohorts joined in, most of even his own side was also shocked by the comment. Luckily, the two sides represented here clashed only in words, and police kept order before both sides left.
This entire story leaves me feeling disgusting. It gave me chills up my back and goose pimples and made me nauseous. I'm sickened by this.
For someone to be able to chant this on a public street in America is an indication of the results of Donald Trump's words about the transgender community over the past 3 years. And it gives them permission to be able to say it without feeling that there is any responsibility of their words.
The people who were supporting the thin blue line in this story don't really seem to care about the law and order that they're there to protest for.
Next we queer up business. AIG refuses to pay life insurance claim for gay deputy who died of COVID-19. Watch this.
In early April, Broward Sheriff's Office Deputy Shannon Bennett was the very first responder to be killed by COVID-19 in South Florida. His family was crushed by the loss, but now they feel like they've been dealt another blow after the AIG insurance company denied their claim for an accidental death in the line of duty.
Essentially, while my family is trying to, again, grapple with getting our bearings back, this type of letter comes in, and of course it floors us.
Shannon's brother Darren tells us they were stunned when they received this letter in response to their claim, saying the company had reviewed it and determined that COVID-19 did not fall under the category of an injury or accident, but, quote, rather, his death was caused in whole or in part by, or resulted in whole or in part from, sickness or disease specifically excluded under this policy.
Shannon Bennett, the gay Broward County Sheriff's deputy who died after contracting COVID-19, was the first emergency responder in South Florida to die of the novel coronavirus. Now AIG is refusing to pay his line of duty death insurance claim, arguing that there is no proof he caught the deadly virus at work. The Broward Sheriff's Office submitted an appeal to the insurance carrier, but it was denied as well. In the second denial, the company admitted that certain health conditions do qualify under Florida law as accidental and caused by employment. But since the coronavirus wasn't explicitly listed, it doesn't count. After the Pulse nightclub shooting, Bennett would park his patrol car near LGBTQ venues to show people that they were protected.
We queer up sports tonight in reporting Colin Kaepernick takes knee with Dr. Dre in an Instagram photo called Defiant. Dr. Dre has got Colin Kaepernick's back. The hip-hop legend posted a photo of himself and Kaepernick kneeling with a one-word caption that said, Defiant, on his Instagram page, which we are now showing on the screen. The choice of the word defiant is notable since Dr. Dre was a central focus of the HBO series The Defiant Ones, which was a four-part documentary series that told his story and the story of Jimmy Iovine. The kneeling pose is what drew national attention to Kaepernick, as that is how he chose to protest systemic racism when he was still a member of the San Francisco 49ers. It is a powerful image that reminds us all what so many in this country and around the world are still fighting for: equality.
Next, we queer up the USA. Number of out U.S. elected officials grows by 21% in the past year. The past 12 months saw LGBTQ representation in elective office in the U.S. grow by 21%, with 843 known out officials as of June. The increase is attributable to several factors, including that more LGBTQ candidates are running for office, more are willing to be out while running, and more are coming out while in office as well. This year should mark a big increase as well, with over 800 running around the country for various offices. However, there is still room for improvement, as an overwhelming majority of these people are white, 77%, and cisgender men, 57%. Even so, we look forward to more progress this November for our community.
Next, we queer up the USA. Attorney General Barr squares off against the House today. Attorney General William Barr and House Democrats square off on a number of issues today, where the exchanges frequently got testy on the facts being laid out by either side. Barr asserted that federal forces have a duty to protect courthouses in Portland, despite the damage to them before the federal officers were sent in being a mere $5,000, and that he did not speak to Stone's prosecutor regarding the Stone case in any way. When he was further questioned about Stone, Barr shouted, "Let me ask you, do you think it is fair for a 67-year-old man to be sent to prison for 7 to 9 years? Barr is 70 years old himself.
Next, we queer up the world in reporting a Bolivian court strikes down a ruling that was made to nullify a same-sex union. A Bolivian court has struck down a ruling from officials against a same-sex couple who wished to have their union registered. The ruling came from a junior court in the country, the second constitutional chamber of the La Paz Court of Justice. The case was brought about by a same-sex couple living in La Paz who had lived together for 10 years. They wished to have their union registered, but the Civil Registry Service refused them last year. Both members of the court said this decision went against the couple's human rights. This follows up a 2018 ruling by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that said countries in its jurisdiction, which includes Bolivia, need to treat same-sex couples without discrimination.
Next we queer up the world. J.K. Rowling cites debunked psychoanalysts to claim a scandal is brewing involving transgender kids. In a follow-up to a story we've been covering for weeks now, J.K. Rowling, the ultra-wealthy Harry Potter creator who threatened legal action to force children's websites to apologize for criticizing her views on transgender people, is now claiming that there is a coming medical scandal that involves puberty blockers for transgender kids. On Twitter, Rowling shared a paper by British psychoanalyst Marcus Evans that criticized conversion therapy bans and even said people were afraid of powerful trans lobbying groups and were coaching kids to pretend to be trans. We will continue to follow this story as it develops and try not to cringe when we pick up our Harry Potter books.
Next, let's catch up on all the news surrounding COVID-19 with our quarantine quickies. The first story tonight is our daily reporting of the coronavirus facts, especially important to the LGBTQ community. First, we report on coronavirus case numbers based on the standard acceptance of 7% of population of the LGBTQ community. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases stand at 1,168,261, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases stand at 310,457. We remind you that America continues to be ground zero of the world's pandemic. The USA is just 4.4% of the world's population, and today America is 26.5% of the world's cases. Next, we report on coronavirus deaths. The world's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 46,025, while America's LGBTQ COVID-19 deaths stand at 10,536. The USA is 22.9% of all of the world's deaths.
Quarantine quickies. Major League Baseball cancels 2 games due to COVID-19 outbreak for the Miami Marlins. Watch this.
You know, this morning there is a lot of uncertainty in Major League Baseball after a coronavirus outbreak within the Miami Marlins organization. 8 more players and 2 coaches tested positive, bringing the team's total number of cases to 14 in just the past few days. The team had to cancel its home opener, and players are now quarantined in Philadelphia, where they played over the weekend. Their opponent, the Phillies, postponed last night's game against the Yankees.
4 more members of the Miami Marlins have tested positive for the coronavirus after the latest round of testing, bringing the total number of players to test positive to 17. The Marlins games have been canceled for the previous 2 days, and their next opponents, the Washington Nationals, elected via a team vote to not travel to Miami for their weekend series. However, the decision on whether the games are played rests with Major League Baseball, not the Nationals. This outbreak comes after players rejected a plan that would have seen them play in bubble cities with much higher scrutiny for quarantine.
I don't blame other cities for not wanting to come to South Florida.
Yeah, that's an all-encompassing soundbite, which is true. And one of the issues to me is many of the players, as we reported last night, likely contracted COVID because of the private parties that they're participating in. And we reported that that is the #1 super spreader going on in America, your private get-togethers in parties.
And the bubble concept seems to be working fine for the NBA. I understand the players didn't want to be away from their friends and families, but if you want to get paid, sometimes you need to make sacrifices, and you need to make sacrifices that are going to protect your health and your family's health sometimes too.
Quarantine quickies. Republicans want to force America open by slashing unemployment benefits. Watch this.
The Republican relief plan,
Totally inadequate.
already facing criticism.
We don't even know if Senate Republicans fully support them.
The Senate's top Republican didn't even realize it includes nearly $2 billion for a new FBI headquarters.
I'm not sure that it is it?
The HEALS Act would drop the unemployment bonus from $600 to $200 a week. It provides $1,200 payments to Americans and billions for testing, schools, rental assistance, and back-to-work grants.
The American people don't just want relief, they want opportunity.
Senate Republicans on Monday proposed a $1 trillion coronavirus aid package, hammered out with the White House, paving the way for talks with Democrats on how to help Americans as expanded unemployment benefits for millions of workers expire this week. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the proposal a tailored and targeted plan focused on getting children back to school and employees back to work, and protecting corporations from lawsuits, while slashing the expiring supplemental unemployment benefits of $600 a week to 2/3.
Well, the news is interesting, if not distressing. The Republicans and the White House are taking a dramatic chance that at 98 days before the election, they're going to take up the ire of 40 million Americans that are currently unemployed and will be affected by these benefits.
And then some of the spending items in the bill are ridiculous. As you saw in the video, there's $2 billion set aside to build a new building in the FBI headquarters, which has nothing to do with coronavirus. But they're going to take the $600 a week that so many people are using to survive right now and cut it to $200 a week. People want to go back to work, but some jobs aren't safe and some places aren't hiring.
Yes, I understand they want to renew the economy and rekindle everything. But again, some businesses cannot open because of COVID-19, and those employees are in need of unemployment.
Well, tonight we next queer up our segment called Good News. After we finish our headlines, we want to report on something that made us smile today in good news.
Queer up good news. TikTok genius goes viral for suggesting undercover gay spy in Bachelorette. We finally have an idea we can all agree with, an undercover gay guy that can help the girl out from picking the trashiest of the guys. I'm just mad I didn't think of it myself, and this hilarious video is good news. Watch this.
Okay, I have a concept that I think would make The Bachelorette a lot better, and that is undercover gay. Pretty much you have a gay guy, none of the straight guys know that he's gay, and you keep him on to like top 5, and he just warns the girl about the guys in the house. He can give his like opinion without there being a conflict of interest. You know, they go on their one-on-ones, they go to brunch, they have a nice, lovely time, and she's like, you know, everyone's been saying this dude's whack, and the guy would be like, yeah, bro, that dude's fucking whack. Don't do it, you know? Like that kind of thing. And I know what you're thinking, and the answer is yes, I would want to be the first one on the show. And you're probably like, how are you gonna do that? Okay, well, I'll show you. Just pretend that my nails aren't here. She's so hot. So hot. Like, literally, such an enunciated body.
Tonight we are broadcasting from our studio set in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center. The museum is in Wilton Manors in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
We joke, we're coming from the gayest place on planet Earth.
We'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale, for making this set in this living museum possible.
Tonight is part 20 of Q's Q&A on coronavirus and the LGBTQ community, July 28th. This special segment is designed to be unique in America to answer your questions about coronavirus for the LGBTQ community during this pandemic.
Tonight we have an American pioneer in AIDS HIV medical treatment. With us is Dr. Howard Grossman, specialist in internal medicine with an emphasis on HIV. He was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. He has become nationally recognized as an educator on HIV issues and as an advocate for LGBTQ civil rights and the rights of our community.
And of course, he is becoming our medical expert during pandemic for Queer News Tonight. Welcome this evening, Dr. Grossman. And before we get into viewer questions, as always, another big week in COVID-19. Did you hear the White House and President Trump has restarted their scientific and medical briefings? Any place that you want to start with before we get into questions? I'm sorry, there was no sarcasm there. No sarcasm.
Yeah, I mean, considering the Twitter storm that he unleashed yesterday, and again going after Dr. Fauci, and accusing him of misleading the American people, it's just mind-boggling. Actually, the most interesting thing that I came across this week was there's an article in the New York Times yesterday that talks about the fact that the antibody test that we've been using for the last 5-6 months is actually looking at the wrong antibodies. So it turns out that the antibody test that was rushed into production and that all the big commercial labs are using in most hospitals is testing for antibodies to the nucleocapsid, so to a protein on the surface of the virus or in the virus, and that's the one that disappears after 3 months, as mine did. And it turns out, though, that the antibodies we really need are the neutralizing antibodies that people keep talking about. And those are antibodies that are generated against a part of the spike protein. We've all seen the picture of coronavirus with all the spikes, and we know that that's sort of the thing that sets off the immune reaction and everything else. So those neutralizing antibodies block the binding of the virus to your cells. Those are the ones we should be testing for, and that's not the antibody tests that we're seeing.
Help us understand what you just said. Do you still have those antibodies, or do you guess, I understand there's not science on it yet, but do you guess that you still have them?
Well, the antibodies that were tested for are not showing up anymore on the lab test. That doesn't mean they're not there in small quantities. That doesn't mean, it's thought that we have cells, B cells, that are then in the lymph nodes, and they're hiding in the lymph nodes, but if they see the coronavirus again, they're going to proliferate and produce tons of antibodies very quickly. We also have our cellular immunity, so T cells that directly attack the virus, and these also may be primed to respond to seeing the virus again and just proliferate like crazy. But T cell activation and T cell measurements are very hard to do in the lab.
So like you.
So those antibodies that aren't showing up now may be there, but the protective antibodies we haven't even been measuring.
Yeah.
That was a shock to me.
So like you, I'm a gay man, and basically what I heard you say, I was asymptomatic like you. I had antibodies like you. I'm still Superman, right? That's what you just said. So I'm still Superman.
That's the opposite of what I said.
Right. I want to ask you really quickly before we jump into viewer questions. What did you think about this week's announcement of going into phase 3 and the bigger test for vaccine?
I think it's very interesting. It certainly is happening very quickly, but they're talking about recruiting 30,000 people. And supposedly they'll have results by November. But what kind of results can they have by November? The only results I can see that they can have is that it's safe for 3 months, and that people may develop antibodies, depending on which antibodies they're looking at, obviously. But certainly if they're measuring neutralizing antibodies, so we may know that. Do we know if those antibodies are going to stick around? Do we know if people will need booster shots? Do we know if there will be long-term deleterious effects? No, we don't know. We won't know anything about that after 3 months. So when you ask people if they're willing to take the vaccine, I think you've got that small group of anti-vaxxers who says no, but you have a much larger group of people who are just suspicious of anything that comes out this fast, and that seems to be timed to come out around the election.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this is not necessarily an anti-vaxxer movement.
America, we remind you, we're coming from South Florida, and of course South Florida is in the news in multiple ways. Not only are we ground zero for the entire planet for COVID-19, but our sports teams are now focusing. And David, a viewer had a question about that.
Yes, with everything going on, a viewer has asked, in light of the Miami Marlins story, should professional sports stop playing?
Well, I certainly think that professional sports is going to have to ride better herd on their players as far as the partying that they do during the season. Probably not a bad idea if you want to have a successful team anyway. That is, I think that's important. I'm not sure. I mean, can they play in certain areas? I mean, baseball is very different from, say, basketball or even hockey, where there's so much body contact.
What happens in football?
Well, football, I wonder, because they are on top of each other. At least some of them are touching each other. Certainly in a tackle situation, you've got people on top of each other. Again, these are full
Just like
contact
our
sports.
bathhouses, by the way.
Like I'm picturing a very different football game.
We'll take that one step farther, Dr. Grossman. What do you think about college football and high school football, which is just on the horizon? We're just a couple of weeks away from practice starting.
Well, certainly, for these young people, they may not even be back in school. Colleges, so many of them are going to be remote learning. Almost every college that I've heard of is going to keep people off campus because dormitories are like, cruise ships on the land. And most people certainly don't want to go back to a cruise ship right now. So I can't see that the kids are going to be there to play these games this season.
Okay. We had a strange question, Misty, this week, which I hadn't read before.
Yeah, this is interesting to me as well. A viewer asked, is it true seaweed has properties that could help with COVID-19?
Well, actually, seaweed, there are some compounds in seaweed that have been studied by different institutions for years, for Ebola, for other things. There was a small report that came, I think, out of Rensselaer Polytech of some compounds from seaweed that could block coronavirus from entering cells. And according to this, it's a small report. It's not peer-reviewed. It was just published online. It's almost like science by press release, which we've seen plenty of. That this was more successful in blocking the virus in cell culture, than remdesivir, which is the drug that they're using to treat very sick people. So, it's interesting, but there are all kinds of chemical compounds in biological materials that are being studied as drugs.
Is this something
it's not natural? They're being studied as drugs.
Is this something that we as lay people can go into CVS and get seaweed and have some benefit potentially?
I doubt it. First of all, it hasn't been studied in animals, let alone humans. We don't know the safety of this particular compound. We could have plenty of other side effects, and just eating seaweed is not going to give you a pure version
So like
of
the
this.
injection of Clorox, this is something that you recommend that we stay away from at this point?
I just don't think there's anything there right now. Okay. But it's all interesting. But I think people get confused when that something is natural. But aspirin comes from a bark of a tree.
Right.
But you want to be chewing on the bark of the tree, or do you want pharmaceutical grade aspirin? That's the big difference, I think, with many of these things. When you're using something that comes from a natural source as a drug, it's a drug.
This morning, a local television affiliate reported that Florida's numbers yesterday was great relief. They were just 9,300 as opposed to 11,000. And that brings, I immediately wondered, well, I wonder if those numbers are right. And a viewer actually quantified that.
Yeah, one of the viewers has asked, do you trust the reporting of numbers now that the CDC is no longer in charge of them?
Well, you were talking about Florida first, so no, we don't trust the numbers from Florida because Governor DeSantis has been cooking the books since the beginning of this and has fired many of the scientists who were tasked with tracking this because they refuse, and that they say they refuse to falsify the data. So I think we're dealing in this weird world in Florida. When you say the numbers going up, you should also look at the numbers in children, which have increased about 34% over an 8-day period, including the numbers of hospitalizations of children in the state. And another child has died in the last 2 weeks. Those are all scary numbers. As far as the fact that that data is bypassing the CDC and going right to HHS, reeks to me of fascism. I mean, that reeks to me of 1984 controlling the data.
Do we have any alternatives? That soundbite you just delivered is so clear to me. Do we have any alternatives in terms of data and feeling confident in the information that is being presented to us?
Well, there's some of these things that are coming out of Johns Hopkins and coming out of University of Washington and coming out of other places that are collecting data that's available around the country, some state level data and things like that. How long they will have access to that information, given the way the administration is trying to hide as much as possible, I'm not sure.
You mentioned an issue about one of the examples of data is based on hospitals. And one of our viewers asked about that. Misty?
Yeah. Dr. Grossman, a viewer asked, what happens when all of the hospitals fill up?
Well, this is, of course, the fear of people when they hear people talk about herd immunity. When herd immunity means that about 70 to 80% of the population becomes infected and hopefully immune. But that means about 200 million people. And with the death rate that there is, that means millions of deaths and hospitals being filled up. What happens when the hospitals are filled? Well, right now, hospitals in Florida are filling up, and they're managing to maintain by repurposing other facilities within the hospital. So there's no elective surgeries. Broward General here in Fort Lauderdale has repurposed the children's hospital, parts of the children's hospital, to treat adults. So I think there is some capacity there. Small rural hospitals have no capacity, have small ICUs, if any, and depend on the big cities near them to accept their patients. So when the big cities are full, what are those small rural hospitals going to do? People in certain parts of this country travel 4 and 5 hours to get to a hospital. Those are tiny places without a lot of resources. Certainly they can call in the National Guard, as they did in New York. Unfortunately, our governor here in Florida has ignored calls from multiple hospitals asking for him to activate nursing ability from the National Guard.
And why won't he do that?
Well, I think doing that would be an admission that all of his stuff has been a total failure.
Politics is what you just said.
Of course. Isn't that what this is all about?
Yeah, it's a shame. We reported last night in Q News Tonight about vaccines and our hope in vaccines. And David, a viewer asked a question about that.
Yeah, and you actually touched on this a little bit, but what is your takeaway that half of America won't take a COVID-19 vaccine when it's made available?
Well, like I said, I think you're dealing with two different things that are operating here. One, the anti-vaxxers who, Trump was tweeting them last night. Most of those people with the hydroxychloroquine were anti-vaxxers and people who want to pray the gay away. I think that's very important to note that they're rebranding themselves as an anti-shutdown. But I think the vast majority of people who are answering that question are scared that a vaccine is being rushed out before it's proven and before its long-term side effects are known, and so they're worried about being the guinea pigs for that.
I'm curious, do you sit in that camp? Do you have that fear?
I have that fear that's what's happening.
If the vaccine became available, let's say it did become available in December or January, we hear you loud and clear, likely it is not going to, but if it did, would you take the vaccine?
I would want to see what the data looks like first. I would want to make sure that the data is reviewed by multiple reputable scientists and that its safety is more of a known quantity. Yeah. And remember, the fastest vaccine that was ever developed is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine that took 4 years to develop.
4 years, my goodness. Well, as an alternative, renowned American HIV doctor, and you've helped us for 20 consecutive weeks untangle what we should be listening to and what's the truth in COVID. Can you provide an official medical statement now that it is possible to pray the disease away? Could you tell us?
Well, it sure
It
works.
would be
for
gone
pray,
by now.
It
That
works
were
for
true.
Pray the Gay Away, right? We know how well that works.
Right. And speaking of the milestone, I make
Thoughts
light
and
of it,
prayers.
but it is not light, as our final question tonight, a viewer and Misty's going to ask, which is really breathtakingly shocking.
Yes. America just passed 150,000 deaths today. Is it going to get even worse from here?
I think it has to, given the politicization of the disease. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. Even HIV. HIV was ignored by all the powers that be, but we didn't see this demonizing of scientists, this anti-science bent, the people who are out there screaming at people wearing masks or screaming and when they're told they have to wear one. That just didn't happen. There was plenty of hysteria around HIV, but it just was a different order of magnitude. So I think that what's going to happen is this country is going to be split as it is ideologically. So you have states where the virus is controlled, like New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, places like that. And then you have states like most of the southern states where things are totally out of control and where their governors some of them barely acknowledge this, certainly deny reality every day. And so it's scary because, look, as Floridians, we are the pariah state. The only places we can travel are places that are equally hard hit and have equally stupid governors.
And I want to ask, as we end our special on Corona, the viewer's question that Misty just asked you is 150,000 deaths. There's all kinds of models that are being revised on what is happening. We projected from one very good model that we would be sitting at 240,000 by the end of the year. That model has been destroyed.
Oh, yeah, we're going to hit that by Labor Day.
Exactly. To the best of your ability, I'm curious where, if you were looking at your crystal ball, and your crystal ball is, except from your medical background, no better than anyone else's, but by the time we end this year of 2020, where do you think the final death number is going to be in the United States?
Oh, I don't know. I've heard numbers of 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people.
Do you think that those are reasonable?
You just don't know. I mean, first of all, if Trump gets voted out of office, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with our democracy. You barely got Bill Barr up on the Hill today, barely acknowledging that the president would have to leave. I think he has plans for undermining that.
Are you? I'm curious.
And then that's going to make things worse.
Are you discouraged?
Well, I am encouraged that much of corporate America has stepped up to the plate. When Walmart and some other big box stores started demanding that people wear masks to get in, they're taking over for what the government should be doing. And I think they see the need for this. They see the bottom line. They see the need to protect their workers as well as their customers. And make it a safe place to shop, because the majority of people in this country do believe that wearing a mask is an important thing. So that's heartening to me. It's completely disheartening where our government is, but that's in so many different ways.
Yeah. Well, we're truth tellers here. Good news and bad news. I can't help but point out to America and the LGBT community. Dr. Grossman, gay doctor, you should, if you're here in South Florida, you should definitely look him up in Midway. He is a valuable ally to our community here, right here in Wilton Manors.
Thanks, Al. Can I say one thing, Al?
Sure.
Just for optimism, I think again, repeating what we repeat every week, people have the tool to protect themselves. It's in their hands. Okay, so there will be lots of people getting sick who don't follow the guidelines. But this is the one thing you can do that will absolutely protect you.
And please tell us that phrase that you've helped us learn so well.
Well, you changed it, but I like your change better.
Right.
Wear the fucking mask.
Wear
right?
your fucking mask.
Right.
Exactly.
But really, so people do have that tool in their hands to protect themselves, and that's powerful.
You have your own safety in your hands, or rather, you have your own safety on your mouth.
On your face.
That's it. Well, that's part 20 of Q's Q&A, Coronavirus and the LGBTQ community. Every Tuesday night, we bring viewer questions and the most important medical advice from our medical expert, Dr. Howard Grossman. This was an American director of the HIV Health Association in America, and he is from Midway Specialty Care Center right down the street here in Wilton Manors. And as always, thank you, Dr. Grossman. I believe we're going to have dinner this week, right?
I hope so.
Yeah, I think we are, and we're going to talk about why our President of the United States can't get this right, and we're going to solve that problem. Probably not.
Good luck.
Yeah. Thanks again, Dr. Grossman.
Thank you.
Next, we bring you Happening Out Television Network's original video photo essay that examines male vulnerability and sexuality with the stunning photos by legendary American photographer Michael Stokes. He is best known for his controversial photographs of veterans who were wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan. He became famous when Facebook removed photos of gay-themed pictures, and they later reversed their actions and apologized. He has published 8 coffee table books of his photography of masculinity. Now he presents 2 large-scale fine art books called Sinners and Saints. Queer News Tonight think everyone at home is going to enjoy this beautiful presentation. Watch this.
Happening Out Television Network and Queer News Tonight presents Sinners and Saints, a collection of Michael Stokes photographs. Having photographed male models for over 10 years, Michael Stokes has noticed many in his audience prefer men that exhibit alpha qualities. What the Madonna whore complex is to those who desire women, a sinner-saint duality might apply to those who desire men. This is why he selects models with outward alpha indicators, but then directs them into poses counterbalancing their outward physical presence, a softer, relaxed pose, discreet and in some instances graceful. The fact that most of the men are naked already signals vulnerability, but at the same time, posing nude in front of a camera also indicates confidence. The dichotomy of the masculine and feminine resides within many, and it is in the choice of the subject to project one or the other. Sinner or saint, the reality is every man is both and somewhere in between.
A beautiful presentation. We end tonight's broadcast with a big finish. These are short story mentions of LGBTQ news and news with a gay perspective. So here we go. First on Q, Queer News Tonight, the big finish. In COVID-19, Lysol sales report rise while condom business goes limp, a new report shows.
More cleaning and less fucking. The world has become a convent.
I think this is amazing news, and honestly, I am very thankful I'm not single. I would be too scared to hook up during this pandemic.
You're clearly not a gay man. In Catholic school, when you imagine the sins of the flesh, the nuns always said that wash your mouth out with soap. I suppose they finally won.
True.
The big finish. Drag Race Holland has been confirmed, and it's coming to our screens soon.
With all the marijuana there, is Laganja Estranja going to be a judge?
Yay! Adoration of drag queens should be global. And my question is, can we watch this in America?
Probably will be able to. Holland, a legal red light district, coffee houses that make drugs completely legal, some of the most interesting sports, leather, and gay sex bars in the world. I have been to Holland many times, and I know RuPaul. There are going to be so many fireworks in this new show. It's going to start with the pronunciation of those impossibly hard Dutch names with 12 vowels. I can't wait. The big finish. Couple wears swastika mask in a Minnesota Walmart.
This picture is the most Walmart thing I've seen since the cheap Queer Eye furniture.
You know, businesses have the right to refuse service, and if I was Walmart, I would kick them out.
I feel like my life is a lie. I think about Rose from Golden Girls when I think about the friendly land of 10,000 lakes. I thought people from Minnesota were supposed to be folksy and friendly. One of our directors here is from Minnesota.
So you should know better.
Not of the police murdering a George Floyd or full of Nazis. The big finish. Tiger King star Carol Baskin says caged Britney Spears should be in the wild as the Free Britney movement hits its fever pitch.
Now, if you watched Tiger King, you know that Britney was connected to most of the tiger breeders shown in the show. Like the picture we just showed of her and Carol Baskin together in an award ceremony.
I agree. They should definitely free Britney Spears and let her control all of her own assets.
I long for the days where the most we heard about this was some random person screaming, "Leave Britney alone!" You know, Carol lives in my hometown about 5 minutes away. I've met her multiple times, and she was always a publicity-seeking nutjob bitch. Carol, shut up. The big finish. No, I won't be going. Trump refused to pay respects to John Lewis lying in state.
I mean, of course he wouldn't go. John Lewis was a champion for equality and minority rights, the things Trump hates most.
Do you want my surprise face? I mean, I could act surprised if you want. But regardless of his opinion, I'm glad John Lewis was still buried in the city rotunda.
Did you show your surprise face? Capitol Rotunda State Viewing. That beautiful moment of John Lewis in his own words and Amazing Grace being played is everything the Donald isn't. So don't you wonder? Remove John Lewis laid in state and having respect with Dr. Martin Luther King. Don't you imagine the Donald would say and act in the exact same way? Our president is an asshole. The big finish. LGBTQ geeks in the news is in. Gundam robots are now real.
So, as the resident geek tonight, since 1979, the Gundam franchise has inspired dreams of giant battle robots around the world. It inspired everything from Transformers to Pacific Rim. Let's hope the fact that these robots finally exist doesn't mean crazy monsters are about to invade.
Whoop, Gundam style. By the way, a 25-ton robot is very scary to me. I just hope their controllers are the good guys or Autobots.
To David's point, I think the crazy monsters have already invaded, and so far the White House has fallen to their attack.
And that is today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first daily LGBTQ evening news show.
Remember, if it's important to the LGBTQ community, it's important to Queer News Tonight. But you must help us. Please click subscribe on YouTube and share this news.
We are literally out of the closet. Could you tell tonight? And into the headlines. This is the only source of live LGBT news in the entire world, and your community needs your support.
You are not alone. There's Gundams. But we'll get through this crisis.
And we are here with you. And this is Queer News Tonight.
Thank you for joining us. And I'm Al Ferguson, and on behalf of Misty Eyes and David Hopkins, we will see you daily and tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Good night.